I really do feel like so many people have so much legitimate fear and trauma in broken relationship. Like I'm never enough. You're not proud of me. And now I'm in this marriage where how I got to this place was I survived, and which was winning. Cause I don't always think surviving's bad. So by the way, a lot of people dog surviving. I'm like,
I agree.
You have
Survival
to survive.
is beautiful.
Yeah.
And super badass.
Yeah. And so, but we get into these places, right, in marriage where it's like, man, again, I only know what I've been through. And up until now, this was hard. Like anything beyond me being hard and kind of shut down and the man like gets punished.
Right.
Like, what do they do for that?
Well, my first thing is, I think it's really important to pick the safest person you know to start practicing vulnerability with.
Oh, that's good.
And that may or may not be your spouse.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And I mean, I wish it was everyone's spouse, but it's just not the case.
Fact.
And I also think you pick a small thing, because here's what I see. If people try to be too vulnerable too fast with somebody that's not safe, you actually will lock yourself down more after that.
Yeah.
You will never be vulnerable again. You will. So I think bite off like a small amount of vulnerability, which maybe for a man is like you bring your best friend out for breakfast and you just have one semi-deep question that's like, what's something that you feel like you're being brave about right now in life?
Yeah.
Just
great.
some kind of question. And maybe that is vulnerable for you.
Yeah.
To just try to bring the conversation to a little deeper level. Yeah. Or you go out with your best friend and you're like, I'd love to start just sharing a little tiny bit about some of the fears I'm having. Would you be open to that? Like most people, if there is a level of safety and you give and you don't have to rip off the Band-Aid and be like, tell them every fear you've ever had and all of the most vulnerable things to you. So I think like take whatever baby step looks doable.
Yeah.
Because you're wanting to create something that feels like momentum. Like I wanted that, so now I can do it again. And
so good.
So that's what I would say with vulnerability. Start with somebody who feels genuinely really safe. And like if you're in a marriage and your spouse doesn't feel that way, something you can do is like, hey, I've been realizing I would love for us to be able to be more vulnerable in our relationship. Is that something that is in your heart? Just like the vision casting, you don't even have to be vulnerable. You can just start like talking about it as a concept. And you can be like, what would scare you about being in a more vulnerable connection? And then maybe you'll just have an honest conversation just about if that would be something you could do or not.
Which is vulnerable in and of itself, right? Like painting that picture for your wife is a vulnerable but powerful step in the right direction. I love it. It's the tiny habits, right? It's if you take a small step, eventually you build this big pattern, this culture that just becomes you. It just becomes who you are. It's so smart because I do think that we try to tackle everything at once or nothing. It's all or nothing. And rarely is that the best option.
The other thing you can do, this is like a sneaky, almost manipulative thing you can do, but I still like it as an idea, is you can get really good at celebrating anytime you see someone else around you being vulnerable. Because what it starts to do, let's say your wife does something that's a little bit vulnerable and you're like, man, Justin, this is what he started doing to help me learn to be more vulnerable, is whenever I do a little bit, he's like, man, I feel so close to you when you share like that to me. Man, that really makes me feel bonded to you. Man, I really like being around you when you do things like that. So if you as a man and your wife does something like that and you just affirm that, it actually sows into your bank account. The affirmation happens when vulnerability happens. So eventually when you're vulnerable with her, there is this pathway, a neural pathway in her brain that says this is celebrated. Or if you're a guy with your guy friends and a guy just shares like, man, I had a hard day. And you're like, dude, thanks so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
And you don't have to because men aren't going to be flowery. Like I would be like, man, that's so wonderful. I love it so much. I feel so close to you. Like they're probably not going to. But like if you just are intentional about affirming it, what that does is it tells your own heart, this is lovable.
Yeah.
This is worthy of connection. This is celebrated. Just celebrating yourself, other people will start to tell your own body it is safe to do this.
Yeah.
It will also create a culture around you where people start to celebrate it with you.
It's so good.